Welcome to the Boring AI Show, the podcast for people who want to understand AI beyond the headlines. We talk about the useful, messy, funny, and very human side of bringing artificial intelligence into the real world. Now, here are your hosts, Tim and Tally.
Alrighty. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Boring AI Show. Today's topic has been long requested. We've had a few requests now for this topic, and it is AI governance, which I know is very, very exciting. So I'm joined here, obviously, by co-host Tim. Who's
Hello.
gonna help, talk about AI governance. Are you excited for this exciting topic, Tim?
Yeah, I always tell people get ready. We're getting into the fascinating world of governance. But I mean, it is actually really interesting when you dig into it. I think a lot of people have some very significant misconceptions of what all governance covers. I think a lot of that's like from our data governance background, if you're treating AI as an IT initiative. So I think this should be fun for people.
Awesome. Let's do it. Well, before we delve into the topic, let's chat AI in the news. I know there's a lot going on right now. Tim, what did you have?
Yeah, so there is a lot going on right now, but I feel like the thing I found most interesting. So we're recording on June 25th of 2026, and a few years back, the OECD, which I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but they announced their AI literacy program they were going to be building for the European Union. And I remember being very excited about like, oh, great. Okay. So we're going to have like a K through 12, like AI literacy focus and, set up. And I know it's slightly different, like, learning scale, not K through 12, but, and it just came out. So the AI literacy program is divided up not just in literacy for the students, but also for the teachers and how to build AI literate teachers and that capability among the instructors and the staff of the school, but
Interesting.
also for the parents. So breaking out of the mold of just it's about the kids, it's also like, how do you help the families navigate this time? And so it really reminded me, Tally, a lot of how we talk about, AI upskilling and literacy. It's not just about like the employer should do it for the employee should do it for themselves. It's like, no, it's a whole ecosystem that needs to be involved in making this happen. Employers, employees, government, community, everywhere in between. So that was really cool to see and kind of read some of what they're building there.
Huh. No, I'll definitely have to check it out. And I have a few friends out here in the teacher space, and and we had a previous guest who, it's hard because I think sometimes there's the black and white thinking of, can we just like ban AI? And it's like, AI is here. How do we use it appropriately as teachers, as parents, as community members? Really, really interesting. Okay, very
Yeah,
cool.
and I think with this too, the thing that strikes me the most about this is the holistic approach. Is that it's not just like, here's a curriculum to teach about machine learning, or robotics. It's, really about thinking about responsible AI. So back to our topic of the day, but also like, how do you get your family involved? I think that's where we're going to see the biggest lift, and the biggest impact is the community. And we see that like when we're doing the upskilling workshops, we see it when, you're working with the executive alignment and the foot soldiers doing the work and everyone in between. That's when you get your biggest impacts. So it's an interesting stuff. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what happens here.
Yeah, I'm curious as well. Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. How about you?
So, yeah, so mine is quote unquote boring. So as some of you may know, I live out in Denver, Colorado. So when I saw this news article, I felt like I couldn't not discuss it because it's on REI, which is a very huge staple out here in Denver with all the outdoor activities.
I
And
love
I'm by
REI.
no means trying to rip on REI, but I think that this highlights something we see with a lot of clients that I just thought would be relevant for listeners. So REI got the headline is actually REI gets roasted for a nonsensical Instagram ad featuring a bike with two sets of handlebars. And REI blames their Meta AI tool. And I just thought this was really interesting because I think it is, I guess the ad was generated by Meta's AI tool, but I think it highlights a bigger issue of, of course, AI is not going to be perfect, but are we just trusting that to go out there without any marketing, any person or human, evaluating that before it reaches the public? So again, not a critical, it was a mistake ad. But that impacts branding, that impacts how you see, an organization. And if you want to feel human centric, when AI is part of your marketing material in a not so great way, it can feel really, inauthentic. And I think we touched on this on the episode where we talked about our predictions for the year and some of the AI pushback. There are certain spaces where we might not want AI in it because of the perceptual risks that you have. If you lose, your reputation, there's reputational risks on the line. But I just thought that was a funny highlight because I think we've all seen, I don't know, those AI images with like 7 fingers and all the funky generation. And it immediately, I think, has a visceral reaction from viewers. And so to see that and get that kind of backlash, and then to blame the AI tools is really interesting because I think, again, this is something we've all faced, but making sure that, AI there will be inaccurate or not great outputs, but it's really up to that human to make sure that they're evaluating and that whatever's being produced is being fully owned by, the brand or yourself.
Yeah,
So
that's
so
very fascinating because, like, and to your point, REI specifically, this is a major, ball drop for them. I feel like because it's, their brand is nature, get outdoors,
exactly,
like,
exactly.
and that's not the narrative that a lot of people have around AI. Is, it
Yeah.
has a negative impact on the outdoors. It has a negative impact on nature and, things like that. And so, yeah, that's but I mean, I also like, we've lived in real companies. We know how it goes. Like, you are behind the timeline and you got to rush and you got to get things done and mistakes get made and things aren't reviewed as carefully as they should be. And, I get it. And it is, I think we're going to see a lot more of these kind of mistakes that, it doesn't mean that the company is terrible and everything else is terrible, but it is a sign of like, oh, hey, pause. Let's make sure we have our quality controls under control.
Yes.
So,
No, and I think that's why I wanted to highlight this article today because I think it just reiterates that point with a really interesting example of just making sure that the quality checks are there and the humans are in fact in the loop.
yeah, I do love it, REI. I am a big fan of
Me
the
too.
REI store here we have in Baltimore, and do enjoy and get myself lost thinking about all the adventures I could have if I just, got the right clothes and prioritized going
Right.
out the door.
Right. That's all it takes. Exactly.
That's all it takes. So,
Exactly. Awesome. Cool. Well, let's delve into the topic today. AI governance. I know that that's a big term. So before we delve in, let's start by defining what AI governance is. I have a definition pulled up from a course I just took, Tim, that I can share. And then maybe if you want to go, and share kind of your definition or how you see governance after that.
so yes, because I don't always rely on official definitions because I find that a lot of people aren't there yet. So,
Well, and I appreciate that. And I think especially like when we think of AI, there's so many quote unquote official definitions, but I think there's a difference between official versus something actually that means something to the person absorbing the definition. If it doesn't mean anything, it's not helpful. So the definition I have here is AI governance refers to the imposition of frameworks, rules, standards, legal requirements, policies, and best practices that govern, manage, and monitor the use of AI intelligence. So it involves, directing and managing, monitoring AI activities in order to meet certain, whether it's like legal, ethical, moral requirements is how I'm reading that. What are your thoughts on that quote unquote fancy definition? Does that resonate
well,
with you in any way?
it does sound like an official definition. This is like when you go to the EU AI Act to get the definition of artificial intelligence. It's comprehensive, like, but still vague in what it's describing. I mean, I think it's a good definition for I'm thinking about we work with a lot of like legal teams and lawyers, and they do need to have exactly what is this thing we are talking about. But a lot of times when we're talking to people, how I describe governance, which is an oversimplification based on the definition that you just provided, which I do think is a good definition. Um, I just say it's the guardrails to make sure that your AI program doesn't surprise you in a bad way. Is one thing I talk a lot about with with our teams around our clients. We want to delight them, not surprise them. And so same with your AI program. You want to be delighted by your AI program, not surprised by it. Like by getting a surprise bill that's way massively over what you were expecting because of your token usage, or having an ad come out that, has multiple handlebars for a bike that doesn't have multiple handlebars, and getting that, black eye in public. And so, as well as like, and I'll use REI, like, I imagine as part of their governance framework, they have a very heavy influence and focus on environmental impact. And so how AI is used, what's the offsets that are being done? Like how do you think through that? And that's to me, the guardrails. It's not just making sure we're being safe with AI. It's about being responsible, for building the future we want, but also making sure you're staying true to your values as a company.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, yeah, literally governing AI. And if you don't do that, sometimes AI ends up, governing you in a lot of ways. There's these unintentional impacts that will happen if there's not that intentional, like you said, guardrails in place.
Yeah.
So I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Intentionality, I think, is a key word here. Like your governance, it's just like a culture at a company. When I've been places where people are like, we don't have any company culture. It's like, oh no, you do. Just whether it's the one you wanted and what you meant to build is a different story. And so same here. When you are like, well, we don't have any governance. Well, you do, but it's just greenfield. Everybody can do whatever they want. And so it
Exactly.
is important to get your framework in place, or at least have your guiding principles in place early.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think you touched on, one of the things I wanted to highlight today of what are the risks, or potential risks of not having the appropriate, AI governance program or any AI governance in place, and I think we talked about you touched on obviously legal implications depending on what state or country you're in. And like with the example of REI, there's real reputational and trust risks, losing clientele because people don't trust the brand anymore because it's associated with, AI and maybe an unintentional way than you intended, like with the case of the two handlebars, especially like you said, with a brand that is so nature focused. And then of course, there's financial risks. And also I think another big risk that isn't always talked about is, the risk of your internal workforce not trusting or adopting these tools, or not trusting leadership for implementing these tools in the first place. I think, by having a comprehensive governance program, you let your workforce know that you guys have got this and that this is a safe, these tools are being used in a safe way with these specific guardrails.
Right.
Any risks I missed there, Tim, or anything you would add?
Well, I would add, so, it's, so one of the books that, Tally and I have been rereading for me, but I think it's new for you, Tally, but, correct me if I'm wrong here, but
Yes, it's new.
Game Storming. Yeah. So Game Storming is a wonderful book. It'll be in the comment or the description. So check it out. Highly recommend it. But one of the things they talk about is the game space. And when you're playing games, you have certain things that make a game space. And one of them is shared rules. Everybody has to know the rules. And I think this is really important with AI because a lot of times we look at governance as this thing we have to do for an external party. Like I have to have governance because if I don't have governance, we're going to face a lawsuit, or if we don't have governance, medical data will go into Copilot inappropriately and we got a big problem. Like, do we have the data classification set up? Although this creates problems if we don't. But also, there's other rules to the game of business, especially in the world of AI, that I think a lot of people miss. I'll just say it that way. Overlook is the word I was looking for. I overlooked it. So, It's also like not just trust in the company of like, you guys got this, right? Like as a company, we've got this, we got a good handle on this. We're not going to look like idiots trying to do stuff here, but also with each other. So there is, and I've encountered this other places where, as I've talked to people, there is a distrust of employees using AI appropriately with each other. And so questions come up like, do I have to disclose that I used AI to make this report for my boss? And it's like, well, what does your governance say? And is disclosure part of your governance framework? And usually people are like, oh, I don't know. Like, I haven't thought about that. And so this is, it's kind of it's not just the legal contracts of what is permissible and okay in your office. It's also the social contracts between you and your market, as well as your team members internally. And so I think that's a piece of governance people miss a lot is how does it facilitate relationships and connection within your teams, as well as create the safe guardrails so that you're not, creating problematic content, with your AI systems.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out. So I guess when folks are thinking about these, an AI governance program, and you mentioned earlier, which I really liked, the fact that, I think we think, okay, have the most comprehensive governance program possible, but sometimes to your point, depending on budget and time available, there can be governance programs that are actually overkill, for certain certain organizations. So I guess what are some things that you would recommend, if somebody's listening and maybe they have a rough governance program or they haven't even started one, but they know people are using AI, what would you recommend people start with in terms of, things to consider when it comes to AI governance?
Yeah, I literally just had this conversation yesterday, and there was a person on the call who was like, "Really? Like that's really how you would approach that?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's what we've seen." Here's what we've kind of encountered out in the wild is that we show up to organizations who have spent a lot of money and time on building out governance programs and don't really even understand what artificial intelligence is, much less how they're going to be using it in their business. They have a rough construct, maybe like, well, hey, we're this type of business. And so we're going to, we're a medical business. And so we're going to be using this to analyze, predictive analytics for medical data and medical outcomes or medical imaging. But it's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, but what else are you gonna be doing? Like, and because chances are you're not having one use case that you're gonna use AI for. And we see that a lot of times people don't see their ROI with AI on a use case. It's the compounding effect of multiple use cases. And so as much as I'd love to say, yes, every use case you have will have a great value and great return, it's just not true. Like, it's just not the way it is. It depends on the nature of the work. So my recommendation, that's a long way to get to my answer here. My recommendation is first thing to do is make sure you have an educated workforce. So it doesn't have to be everybody, but your AI forward team, whoever is your initial AI group, like they really need to do some level of upskilling or alignment of what is AI, what's it mean for your organization, what are your cultural values, how does AI align to those values, then start your governance program. Because otherwise you could build something way bigger than what you actually need to get started. And that's one we've seen that time and time again, where we show up and people have invested a lot of money in a governance program that is way more comprehensive than anything they could ever possibly need, which is kind of a waste of money. So, Tally, what are your thoughts on that? I know you've been doing a lot of study and work with governance.
No,
Where
I
do you think?
love that. I think it's, to your point, upskilling and making sure we're all even aligned in the term. There's so many times where we go in and everybody has different ideas of what AI even is, or people didn't realize that anything beyond, ChatGPT was AI. So I think that's a huge piece. I think the other two pieces, for somebody especially just getting started, is creating some sort of AI forward team or AI steering committee is really critical. So instead of, one person just leading the front, making sure there's people from different departments with different care abouts. So whether that's, somebody from legal and the human side from HR, how this is being adopted, making sure that there is a comprehensive, steering committee, and leaders who are clear on what their AI mission is and can spread that across the company, and then that team can help build the AI governance program with all of those different critical perspectives.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I think that's really needed. And the other piece too is just really baselining where you are today. I think that oftentimes companies aren't even aware that maybe employees are using AI today and to what degree. And so, or if existing systems that they've already had now have different AI features, for example. So really doing a comprehensive analysis of what AI is actually being used today and by whom is really useful to also start to frame, okay, wait, should it be used this way? Should it not be? So really just, yeah, taking that pulse on where you are today. I think those are the other two key pieces there on top of upskilling.
Right. And again, keeping your frameworks for governance aligned to the realities of today, which again, if you invest heavily upfront on this massive program, um, things change. So for instance, with Microsoft Word, you never had to like question, can I use, spell check with Word if for medical data? Like if I'm writing a medical report, or you don't have to say, can I use the thesaurus in Word if I have this other kind of data in this document? But with your tools like Copilot and ChatGPT and Claude, like based per feature, you could have a different, level of risk that you're dealing with. And so we see this, the most common instance of this is the web search feature, with ChatGPT and Copilot and, other tools. How is that configured and how is that set up in your environment could be, going outside of your tenant, outside of your, closed walls for your environment. And so just again, recognizing this can happen. So what's the rules of that? Now, if that feature is brand new feature and didn't exist when your governance program, you spent your hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars to build your governance program, now you have updates that you have to do. And so, this is where your governance program, it's not like, well, if I'm using this tool, these things are okay. It could be if I'm using this tool with this kind of data and these features, this is what I need to be mindful of. It gets pretty complex pretty quickly, which is why don't start big. Start focused and small. What are the rules of the road? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? What are your data classifications? Start there. Just that simple. What's your intake process? Somebody has an idea of something to do with the AI tools. How are they working with you to review that process? And say, that's from a security perspective, you can't use ChatGPT for that. You have to use, our internal tool we've built. And again, that's not saying, I'm not trying to imply that there's a security issue there by default with ChatGPT Enterprise or anything like that. But again, it's your data and your classifications. You set the rules of what can go where. So
Yeah. And I think you also highlighted a really good point there too around, you know, just because also you've built a governance program doesn't mean that's going to be the governance program forever. In fact, stuff is evolving so rapidly with AI, and we're seeing, existing systems that maybe you've already implemented, starting to integrate AI into a lot of these solutions. So making sure that there are some sort of continuous means with that AI forward team or steering committee to take a step back and reevaluate on a somewhat regular basis of, are we still in line? Is there anything we need to update here? I know, Tim, you brought up the other day the concept of wearables and how that's going to be a new thing that's going to be needed to, be integrated into these. And so with all of these new technologies on the horizon, this is kind of an ever evolving living thing. AI governance is really, especially in the world of AI, is going to be a continuous, ever growing process.
yeah. Yeah, I always like when anytime there's about to be an Apple event, you can always guarantee there's going to be somebody talking about the foldable phone. It's like, it's coming, the foldable phone is coming. And now I feel like the next version of that is AirPods with cameras in them. And everybody's like, oh, there's going to be AirPods with cameras in them coming. And I've seen it for like the last 3 Apple events, people saying, this is Apple's foray into AI wearables and yada yada yada. So, but it does bring up a question of, when you think about the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. It's like, well, when they're recording and doing activity, there's a light on them. But how much do you really look at people's glasses, when they're walking by you? And if there was a light on, would you even notice? And on top of that, like if you start thinking in smaller form factors like AirPod Pro, I'm thinking is fits in your ear. It's pretty small. And when my sideburns are long, hard to see that they're in my ears. I guess the
Right.
camera wouldn't work that well either there, but you get the idea. And so, does your
Right.
governance program address
Account for
AI
that.
wearables?
Yeah.
And the pin, like I want to say Humane pin. I don't know if Humane's still around. I don't think they are, but I could be wrong there. But there was like a pin that had that was basically like a walking Alexa, that you could just talk to, and Echo device, and it was just attached to you. I was at an event one time where somebody had it was called Pocket. It went on the back of your phone, and it would record the conversation you were having in real time. And the guy kept like waving his phone around as he was talking. He was like a hands talker and like waving his phone around. And I noticed the red light on the back of his phone. I was like, wait, are you recording this conversation? He's like, oh yeah, I forgot to say. I'm like, well, we're in Maryland and that's problematic, So, and just recognizing, for your work environment, do people like this guy didn't even think about, oh, I can just record stuff. I'm at a conference, I can just record stuff. And are people even thinking, oh, I shouldn't have my AI features turned on when I walk into the office, Um, should Siri be able to hear, "Hey Siri," when we're just walking in the office? So
Right.
it's a
But
good
even knowing to ask those questions in the first
right.
place, is where it's really critical to have that AI forward team that has the right people in there to, one, be knowledgeable of that, and two, understand the regulations that have to do with your vertical and your state. So I think that's huge.
Yeah. And I know all the security clearance people who've heard this are like, "Duh, of course you need to turn all that off."
Right.
And I know a friend of mine who was very much into physical security and protection. He's like, "Turn everything off, all of it off." I'm like, "Okay, that's nice, but that's not the world I live in." So,
Right. Or even knowing, is it recording right now or not? Or like, when you're in a Teams meeting, are you alerting your, people who are on the call that it's recording? Or, so really giving the opportunity for consent starts with your first comment there, Tim, education, being really aware of what these tools are capable of. What are their automatic settings versus settings you might have to reset or configure, and really getting the education necessary to really understand, the tools that your workforce is using.
yeah. And so pivoting a little bit here, and I know I'm going a little off track, but just to kind of frame up, like, so what should your governance program have at a minimum? Like Tally, you mind if we jump into that a little bit? Because I think one
Let's do
thing
it.
is when I've talked to some people, like in my lawyer group of friends, we say governance and they're like policy. And like that's their mindset. I talk to my cybersecurity friends and they're like, you have your data classification systems and all this. And it seems like everybody has a little bit of a different definition of what should be in the policy in the governance program. So where's your mind at, Tally, for what people should have? Minimal viable product.
I was gonna say minimal is different than, yeah. So and again, it will really depend on industry as well.
Mhm.
If you're dealing with HIPAA, also your state mandates. But if we're talking minimum at large, I think one, really having an ability to catalog and then maintain that catalog of what AI models currently exist today. Also, cataloging what data, classifying and understanding what data is being used today and how that data, um, where that data is going with the various AI models. So if a data is, determined classified, should that be used with any AI, closed system AI? What does that actually look like? So really, I think it's the data classification models, cataloging existing AI models, and really understanding what AI models exist today. And then I would also say, yes, policy is really great, but making sure your AI policy not only complies with, various regulations and legal standards, but also connects with your ethical and moral brand and vision for the company. I mean, we just talked about with REI, for example, that this is a huge miss because their brand is all about nature and human, and life, like living. And so, what are the impacts on nature with these tools? Well, if you're another organization that has that should be, that might not be a legal mandate that you're thinking through, but you really need to take the time to think about what are your ethical standards to then apply that to your AI governance framework. But no, I know people go right to policy, but I do think policy having some set of guidelines is really useful for an organization. Of course, I think there are a couple steps in order to get there. And like I said, that model discovery, the data classification piece, and then also continuous monitoring to see if things have shifted, I think are the really critical pieces in my mind. What about
Yeah,
you?
agree, totally agree, and I would add, with monitoring, making sure you have your model inventory tools as well. So, like, for instance, you might have Microsoft Copilot, the professional Copilot, but do you have Claude's, Opus or Sonnet turned on to work with Copilot? Because that creates a different, risk level. And again, not necessarily in a bad way, not by default. You have to see what you have configured. And so, do you have, one of the things I'll be talking about later, when we talk about AI use cases, I have started playing with a new tool called Higgsfield. I mean, it's not new, but new to me. And I'm really enjoying it, but it has like tons and tons of models inside it. Adobe Firefly, same way. You have lots of models you can select from and use, but it's all through that one tool. And so that's also a good from a cost savings perspective to make sure you're not like paying for the same thing in different places. I would also add to this, what is your intake process? So as somebody has ideas, what happens? Like it shouldn't be that they just go and do their thing. There should be some kind of review of the idea, or that you've set up, like, if you're using these approved tools, here are the example use cases they are approved to be used for. And if you have something that's not one of these things, here's the workflow to work with us to review it. And where I'm going with that is, some of these tools, it's like super simple. I want to write an email to be less angry, or I want to, make a meeting agenda, whatever. We're big fans of the 7Ps framework, which is from Game Storming. That's where I had first encountered it. And so when I make an agenda, I'm thinking in the 7Ps framework. But, what if I wanted to use something of, I want to analyze all of our past projects and communications with our clients to determine X, Y, and Z? Well, there's kind of questions around that. Like, well, what's the model we're using? Where's that data going? How's that process going to be reviewed and assessed? Are we using Copilot for that? Are we using, our enterprise Claude subscription or our enterprise ChatGPT subscription? So, I think that workflow is also very often overlooked. So, having, like you were saying, having these activities to get ready for your policy, build your policy, I would include minimal viable product. You need to have a use case review workflow of somebody has an idea, what happens? So,
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Well, anything else to add on the governance front? I know, for those listening, this is a large, large topic. So we just wanted to touch on some of the initial pieces for those starting out. But obviously, if there's an area you'd like to hear more about, different risk management frameworks, or you want to delve into, anything governance related, please let us know. Don't hesitate to reach out and we can definitely delve into that further. But anything else to add here, Tim?
Yeah, I would say if you highlighting specifically for small business, a small to medium sized business, because this is where I have heard people bring this up directly. Okay, so what's the first thing we do? So let's break it down step by step. Step one, build your AI forward team. Have an executive sponsor. and build your AI forward team. Or steering committee, as Tally was saying earlier. Who's the people who are driving this AI thing forward? Step one. Step two, make sure they are educated and know, and it's not just like, I like AI, like know how to work with it, know its constraints, know its abilities, know, the risks that come with it and what matters for your business. We get caught up in all the cool stuff it can do, and people forget there's things that you don't want it to do because you want to keep that part of your business human, and make those conscious and intentional decisions. So build out that education. Step three, I'm a big fan, like Talia said, inventory and understand where you are today. Don't jump straight to your policy because you might find that there's somebody doing shadow AI stuff that's actually core to your business running at this point. Remember, if everybody who's forgotten to access databases that ran businesses and nobody knew about until Bob retired, and turns out Bob had been running everything through this access database or Excel spreadsheet. Don't do that. Like AI, we can be there already, with AI. Don't let that happen to your organization. Audit, use your tools, whether it's your log mining or your data loss prevention systems or whatever, figure out what is running in your systems, create the approved list, then create your policy. What is okay, what's not okay, acceptable use policy, going from there. Then create your workflow. Here's how to work with us. I also am a big fan, Tally, of you have your policy and then you have your procedures, which is like how to implement the policy. So like a procedure would be like the workflow of how to bring a new use case to the table or how to bring a new AI tool to the table. Hey, Harvey AI's system just came out with new capabilities and we want to bring it in here. Cool. How do we get that approved and reviewed? That's a procedure. Then a standard would be like, these are the tools that are approved and here's what they're approved to do. You don't want to put that in your policy because you want your policy to have some room to run. And if you're going to be changing tools every quarter, which you could be getting new tools every quarter, it is possible. And likely in this world of AI, don't put that in a policy, put that into your standards. And then guidelines, just best practices of how to use these tools. These documents don't have to be 500-page things. And you can use Copilot and Claude and ChatGPT to help you write them. So get your policy, make sure you're working with an appropriate legal team to build your policy properly so that's legally enforceable. But your procedures, standards, and guidelines, your AI tools can help you with those things. So that's where I'd say if you're small to medium business, or even a large business just getting started, these are things to do to get going. Did I miss anything, Tally?
No, and I love the breakdown of procedures, policies, and guidelines because I think that really is a critical piece for people to understand, and I don't think that's always clear. So yeah, from a small business standpoint, and again, just from starting out I think this is, I think you covered it.
Cool. Yeah, this is I really, I find governance a very fascinating conversation, usually because it starts with all we need is a policy. And then as you get talking to people about what else governance covers, it's like, oh, well, we need that too, and that, and that, and that. And so it's definitely a snowball topic. And just, I will say, people beware. It gets easy to be piling on things of well, you need this too, and this too, and this too. So if you're working with consulting teams and groups that are guiding you on how to build a governance, just make sure you're keeping focused on why do I need that now? That's a really good question to continuously ask the consultants that are helping you build this stuff.
Yeah, agreed. Awesome. Well, let's jump into use cases here. And I'm curious because you said I know you brought up your use case a little bit, but let's hear how you've been using AI.
Yeah, so Higgsfield AI is a new to me tool. I mean, I've used Firefly since it was Firefly. It was before that. I've been a Photoshop nerd since I was early in college. I think it was Photoshop 3 or 4 I started using and was totally enamored with it and have been a hobbyist ever since. And so Higgs in 11 Labs, I'm a big fan of 11 Labs and really like what they do. Higgsfield AI is basically a creative suite. I'm going to say, I don't know if Higgsfield AI would agree with this statement, but to me, they very much feel and seem like they are designed to be a AI movie studio. Like, and you can, do all the things you need to do to be able to create consistent AI visual assets and auditorial assets. And so it's pretty neat because what I've found interesting in following some of their tutorials and exercises is creating consistent characters that could show up in whether they're ads or video promotional materials or user generated content on social media platforms. But it's like every piece of the ad. So it's like you can create the character, you can create the script for the character, you can create the scenes, and so you can mesh your character with specific scenery and specific props and products. It's really sophisticated what you can do with it. Again, I'm not a commercial for Higgsfield, but hey, Higgsfield, if you're listening, you want to throw me some free credits, be happy to check it out even further. But yeah, I'm using it to explore. I do think AI has a huge value and impact for creativity, and this has been a really interesting thing. So I used ChatGPT to create 30 images of a character, and use that to train a custom model in Higgsfield to create that character. So now I can create videos with that character doing all kinds of things. So last night I was doing a video where the character, he's like this Nordic looking Viking guy, is walking down the streets of Fells Point. And I was able to actually provide the place in Fells Point, that I wanted to using Google Street Maps. I don't know if this is an improved use case of Street Maps. Sorry, Google. But taking screenshots of like Fells Point area, putting that in to say, this is the place that I'm working with. And it created a really nice video with that. So pretty cool stuff.
Very cool. I have a friend who's writing a book that takes place in a town out in Colorado, and they're trying to visualize it, and I'm curious if that could be used for that. Really cool. I love that.
Yeah, I am a big fan of using using ChatGPT Image 2 for helping me visualize, but also Google Maps is insanely good with their visuals and what they have with content. Also from a historical perspective, I don't remember. I know it used to be able to be able to go back in time with Google Maps to be able to see maps from previous times and photos from previous times. I don't know if you can still do that. I haven't done it in a while, but I used to do that for my hometown where a lot of my ghost stories take place. And I was going back to look at pictures of the town I grew up in when it was the town I grew up in the 80s. So pretty cool stuff.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, the use case I wanted to bring up today was actually a use case we talked about with the interns that I just thought would be really beneficial for this audience to hear. We have 2 summer interns who have been amazing, and they're helping us ideate different ways to approach workshops and sessions in a more gamified or getting people out of their regular mode of thinking in professional world and to get more into a creative mindset. And so one of our interns had this really great idea, but she kept being like, but I don't know how I would go about that. And Tim highlighted something that I think would be really helpful for our audience to hear. But if you ever have that question of, I don't know how to go about that, and you're working on your own, try brainstorming with AI, really, really, try and almost conversate or ideate with, your chatbot of choice. And of course, what comes out might not be useful, but at least it'll help in your thinking and give you different ways to approach the problem at hand. So I just thought that was a really good use case. The other piece I wanted to highlight recently is I have been playing around with we use Copilot as one of the many AI tools here at Minder Machines. And we obviously make a lot of slide decks. And so I was playing around not only with using Copilot, as I mentioned in another episode, to create slide decks, but using the PowerPoint agent. And it's really interesting because it's pretty good at mirroring or mimicking if you have an AI or a PowerPoint template. Of course, there's a lot that needs, cleaning up when it generates slides, but it picks some interesting images, and it's a great starting point. in terms of slide building. So then you can just go in and edit as opposed to just starting from scratch. So those are the two use cases I wanted to share today.
No, that's awesome. And this is an area where I've said it before. I will say it again. Feel free if these are things that you hear us talk about, like, and you're like, hey, how do I do that? Like, reach out. We're very happy to talk to people. And I was just pulling up while Tally, you were going through your use case and looking at our global map of listeners from our feed platform. Really cool. Like, it's super awesome to see, people in Oceania and Asia and Europe and South America who are listening to us. And we love our North American people as well. But yeah, like, don't hesitate to reach out, team. And if you're
Hmm.
not sure who to reach out to, you can just hit info@mindovermachines.com. You can reach out to Tally or I on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
We're always around, so happy to chat with you. The intern use case is really, I think, really useful too, from a using AI to just kind of like, idea vomit. Like, I'm just going to
Yes.
give you AI all, what I'm thinking. Now, I want you to organize what I'm thinking, help with that. Remember, don't offload your own thinking. You can go through that exercise yourself as well. Um, so the other piece though is go back and say, and so that is what I'm trying to do. Now, here are the tools I have available. What are some ideas of how I can actually do what I'm trying to do? Um, this is, I think, where things really light up, because it's helping you stitch together thoughts of like, here's what I'm thinking. How can I do that? How can I do that with these constraints? And go from there. So,
Awesome. Love it. Anything else to add here today, Tim?
Um, let's see. We talked about governance. We talked about all kinds of pieces with the governance. I do want to just emphasize, like, it doesn't have to be a huge effort to start. And just like one of my old mentors used to say, once begun, half done. Same thing with governance. Like, just get started on something small. We gave you some outline of like, do these things and get yourself going.
Love it. Awesome. Well, as Tim mentioned, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions around future shows, previous shows, just in general, just want to chat. We're always here. And subscribe, listen, share, comment, do all the things.
Yeah, do all the
Awesome.
things, all the things, all the
Exactly.
time.
Well,
So,
thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Boring AI Show. Practical AI minus the hype. Subscribe, share it with someone on their own AI journey, and we'll see you next time.